The Fitzgerald Auditorium at Colorado State University seats 1,800 people for doctoral hooding ceremonies, and I know that number because I looked it up 3 weeks before the event, the same way I look up every capacity, every tolerance, every load limit in my professional life. I am a structural engineer. I calculate what a beam can hold before it fails. I never once calculated what my marriage could hold before it failed, and that is the part of this story that still keeps me up at night. My name is Marcus Riley. I am 41 years old, and on a Friday afternoon in early June, I sat in the third row of that auditorium in a black robe with purple velvet trim, waiting to be hooded as a doctor of philosophy in structural engineering. 5 years of night classes, weekend research, and a dissertation on seismic retrofitting that I had rewritten 4 times sat behind that single moment. My wife, Rachel, was not there. My 3 children, Owen, 15, Ava, 11, and Grace, 8, were not there either. I want you to sit with that fact for a second, because it is the fact this entire story is built on. 4 family members, 4 reserved seats in row C, all 4 empty. I need to explain what this degree cost me before I explain what happened, because people hear PAAAHDAADDDDHEHE and picture something abstract, something that happens quietly in a library somewhere. That is not what the last 5 years of my life looked like. It looked like missing Owen's freshman football season because my seminar met on Thursday nights. It looked like facetiming Grace's kindergarten graduation from a research lab in Fort Collins because I could not leave in the middle of a data run. It looked like telling Ava 3 separate times that I could not make her dance recital because my committee meeting had been moved. Rachel absorbed all of that. She managed 3 kids and a full-time nursing job and a husband who was present in the house but absent from the family for 5 straight years. And every single time, she told me the same thing. Finish it, Marcus. We are proud of you. Finish it. So I finished it, and on the day I finally walked across that stage to have the purple hood placed over my shoulders, my wife and my 3 children were 40 minutes away, in the backyard of a 9,000 square foot property in Cherry Creek, watching my former best friend, Derek Voss, get down on one knee in front of 200 guests, a live string quartet, and a drone camera capturing the whole thing for what I later learned was a professionally produced engagement video. I did not know that yet. I found out the way you find out most devastating things now, which is through a phone screen, standing alone in a hallway while everyone else around you is hugging their families. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without Derek. Derek Voss and I met in undergrad at Colorado State, 19 years old, both broke, both majoring in civil engineering, both working part-time at the same hardware store in Fort Collins. We started a small structural consulting firm together 11 years ago, Riley Voss Engineering, 2 guys and a used pickup truck, doing residential inspections and small commercial jobs. Derek was the front-facing partner. He was charismatic, quick with a joke, the kind of guy who could walk into a room of strangers and leave with 3 new clients and everyone's phone number. I was the technical partner. I did the calculations, the drawings, the load analyses that made sure the buildings we signed off on would not fall down. Derek closed deals. I made sure the deals were structurally sound. It worked for a long time because we both understood our roles and respected what the other one brought to the table. Rachel and Derek's now fiancée, a woman named Priya Anand, became close through us, the way spouses of business partners often do. Dinners together, holidays together. Our kids grew up thinking of Derek as an uncle. He coached Owen's youth soccer team for 2 seasons. He was in the delivery room, in the hallway outside it anyway, when Grace was born, because I had called him in a panic when my car wouldn't start and he drove 40 minutes to take me to the hospital himself. I am telling you all of this because I need you to understand that Derek was not some acquaintance. Derek was family, which is exactly why what happened hurts in a way that a stranger's betrayal never could. About 18 months ago, the firm started to shift. Derek had been talking for over a year about wanting to move the business in a bigger direction. His words, meaning fewer of the steady residential inspection contracts I had built our reputation on, and more high-visibility commercial development deals. The kind that come with press coverage and ribbon cuttings and Derek's name in the Denver Business Journal. I told him I thought that was risky. Commercial development in Colorado had gotten volatile, interest rates were climbing, and I did not want to bet the firm's stability on a handful of splashy projects. Derek listened, nodded, and then quietly started pursuing those deals anyway, using firm resources, without officially looping me in on the financial exposure. I found out about the extent of it by accident from an email that was supposed to go to Derek and got sent to the general firm inbox instead. That was 4 months ago. I confronted him. He got defensive, said I was too cautious, said I had gotten small since I started my doctorate, said the firm needed someone willing to take risks while I was busy playing student. That phrase, playing student, is one I have not been able to forget. We had not spoken outside of necessary business communication since that conversation. So when I found out 3 weeks before my graduation that Derek was proposing to Priya on the same Friday as my hooding ceremony, I assumed it simply would not be a conflict for my family because I assumed my family understood which event actually mattered to me and which one was optional. I was wrong about that too. Rachel told me about the invitation on a Tuesday night while I was reviewing my dissertation defense slides at the kitchen table. Priya wants us there, she said. It's a surprise proposal. Derek's been planning it for months, and the kids have been asking about it. They love Priya. I looked up from my laptop and said the ceremony is that same afternoon. Rachel said, I know, but Derek's thing is in the evening, 6 o'clock. We can do both. I should have said something firm right then. I should have said, Rachel, this is 5 years of my life. This is not a thing we squeeze into the same Friday as Derek Voss's engagement party. But I didn't, because some part of me still believed that if I had simply done the work, quietly and consistently, for 5 years, my family would show up for the 2 hours it took to watch me finish it. I said, okay, as long as you're all there when they call my name. She kissed my cheek and said, of course we will be. I should have written that down. I should have treated that promise the way I treat a load calculation, something you verify twice before you trust it with people's lives. Instead, I believed her, and 3 weeks later I stood backstage in a borrowed doctoral robe, checking my phone one final time before they told us to silence them, and saw a text from Rachel that said, running a little behind, save us seats, we'll slip in quietly. They never slipped in at all, and when the ceremony ended and I walked out into the lobby, diploma case under my arm, searching the crowd for 4 familiar faces among all the strangers hugging their families, my phone lit up with a single new text, not from Rachel, but from my son Owen, 15 years old, and it said 4 words that I am still trying to fully understand. Dad, you need to see this. I stood in that lobby with the phone in my hand, and my first thought, the stupid, hopeful thought of a man who still wanted to believe the best about his own family, was that Owen was sending me a photo from the drive over, something like almost there. Sorry we're late. I opened the text. It was not a photo from the road. It was a video, 19 seconds long, filmed vertically, shaky, clearly shot on a phone held low so it would not be noticed. It showed a backyard strung with string lights, a crowd of maybe 200 people in cocktail attire, a string quartet playing something I recognized but could not place, and in the center of the frame, Derek Voss, down on one knee, holding a ring box up toward Priya Anand, who had both hands pressed over her mouth. The crowd around them was cheering. And standing 4 feet from Derek, close enough to be clearly, unmistakably in frame, was my wife, wiping tears from her eyes, and behind her, my 3 children, Owen holding the phone that was filming this, Ava standing on her toes trying to see over the adults in front of her, and Grace, my 8-year-old, sitting on someone's shoulders so she would not miss it. I checked the timestamp on the video. It had been sent at 2:41 in the afternoon. My name had been called to receive my hood at 2:34 in the afternoon. 7 minutes. My entire family had missed the single moment I had worked 5 years toward by 7 minutes, and instead of being 7 minutes late walking into my ceremony, they had been 40 minutes away, fully present, fully in frame, cheering for someone else's proposal. I want to explain something about how my mind works because I think it matters for understanding what I did next. I am not a man who explodes. I have never once, in 11 years of marriage, raised my voice at Rachel in anger. When I am hit with something devastating, my brain does not produce heat. It produces a kind of eerie, clinical stillness, the same stillness I use when I am staring at a crack in a load-bearing wall. And I need to figure out exactly how bad it is before I decide what to do about it. Standing in that lobby, diploma case under one arm, phone in the other hand, I felt that stillness settle over me completely. I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I put the phone in my pocket, walked to my car alone in the parking garage, and sat there for 11 minutes without starting the engine. Then I drove, not home, and not to Derek's engagement party, but to a diner on College Avenue that Rachel and I used to go to when we were first dating, back before kids, back before the firm, back before any of this. I ordered a coffee and a slice of pie I did not eat, and I opened my laptop, and I started doing something I am genuinely good at. I started gathering data. Here is what I found in the next 90 minutes, sitting alone in a vinyl booth while my family celebrated someone else's engagement without me. First, I pulled up the firm's shared calendar, something I still had full access to despite 4 months of frozen communication with Derek, and I found that he had blocked off personal all day on the exact date of my graduation, 3 weeks in advance. The same week Rachel told me about the invitation. That told me he had planned this proposal knowing full well what date my hooding ceremony fell on, because our firm calendar had my graduation marked on it since February, added by our office manager, Denise, who puts every partner's major life event on the shared calendar as a professional courtesy. Derek had seen that entry. Derek had scheduled his proposal on top of it anyway. Second, I opened the firm's financial software, something else I still had access to, and I started looking more closely at the commercial deals Derek had been quietly steering the firm toward for the past year and a half, the ones that had caused our falling out in the first place. What I found in those 90 minutes at that diner booth changed the entire shape of this story, because it was worse, much worse, than the mild overreach I had confronted him about 4 months earlier. Derek had personally guaranteed the firm on 2 commercial developments in the Denver metro area using Riley Voss Engineering as collateral without my signature, which under our founding partnership agreement, he was not legally permitted to do without my written consent. I checked the partnership agreement twice to be certain, because I did not want to act on a mistake. I was right. Both signatures were required for any liability exceeding $200,000. One of those developments, a mixed-use retail and residential project in Aurora, had gone sideways in the last 6 weeks due to a permitting dispute with the city and the exposure to our firm, my firm. The one with my name on the door and my professional engineering license attached to every structural sign-off we had ever issued, was now sitting at just over $1.4 million. Derek had put my license, my name, and 11 years of my professional reputation on the line for a deal I had explicitly warned him against without telling me, while I was buried in the final months of a doctorate he had mocked me for pursuing. And on the day I finished that doctorate, the day that was supposed to be the payoff for 5 years of sacrifice, he was 3 weeks into knowing this exposure existed, proposing to his girlfriend at a lavish party my family attended instead of watching me graduate. I sat in that diner booth until it closed at 10 o'clock. The waitress, a woman named Colleen who had been working there since I used to bring Rachel in for $2 coffee refills 16 years ago, refilled my cup 4 times without asking why a man in a doctoral robe was sitting alone doing spreadsheet math on a Friday night. When she finally came to tell me they were closing, she looked at me and said, "Rough day, honey." I told her it was the best and worst day of my life, and I was still trying to figure out which parts belonged to which category. I drove home a little after 10. The house was dark except for the porch light. Rachel's car was in the driveway. I sat outside for another 20 minutes before I went in, because I needed to decide something first, and it was not a decision about my marriage, not yet. It was a decision about what I was going to do with the folder of financial documents now sitting open on my laptop, documents that proved my former best friend and business partner had put my entire professional life at risk without my knowledge. On the exact same day, my family chose his celebration over mine. Because here is the question I could not stop asking myself in that driveway, engine off, house dark except for one porch light. If Derek was willing to gamble away my professional reputation behind my back for 18 months, and my own wife was willing to watch him propose while I stood alone on a stage waiting for a family that never came, what else had I not been paying attention to? I went inside a little after 10:30. Rachel was sitting at the kitchen table, still in the dress she had worn to Derek's party, mascara smudged under her eyes in a way that told me she had been crying, though I no longer had the energy to guess whether it was guilt or something else. The kids were already asleep upstairs. She looked up when I walked in and said my name the way people say it when they already know they have done something they cannot undo. "Marcus." I need to explain. I sat down across from her at the same table where she had once told me to finish it. "Marcus, we are proud of you." I did not raise my voice. I asked her one question. "What time did you leave the house for Derek's party?" She looked at her hands and said 1 o'clock. "My ceremony started at 2. Fort Collins to Cherry Creek is an hour with traffic." She had left the house a full hour before my ceremony even began, with more than enough time to watch me get hooded first and still make the party by 6. She had not been late. She had chosen deliberately, hours in advance, to skip the beginning of my ceremony entirely so the kids could, in her words, not miss the surprise. I asked her if she knew Derek had scheduled his proposal on the same day as my graduation on purpose. She said she didn't think about it that way. I told her I did think about it that way, because I had spent 5 years thinking about very little else, and it took Derek exactly 0 effort to make my family choose him over me without even trying. Then I opened my laptop and showed her the financial documents. I watched her face change as I explained the $1.4 million exposure, the missing signature, the partnership agreement Derek had violated behind my back for a year and a half while calling me small for pursuing a doctorate. Rachel went very quiet. She said, "Does this mean the firm could be in real trouble?" I told her it meant more than that. It meant the man who had just gotten down on one knee in front of 200 people, the man my wife and children had chosen to watch instead of me, had been quietly risking everything I had built for over a decade, and had done it while I was too buried in coursework to notice, the same coursework everyone in that backyard apparently considered less important than a string quartet and a drone camera. I did not sleep in our bedroom that night. I took a bag to my brother Dylan's place in Longmont, the same way a man does when he needs distance to think clearly instead of react. Dylan is a contractor, not an engineer, but he understands structural failure in his own way, and he knows better than to ask questions before a man is ready to answer them. He put a beer in my hand, said nothing, and let me sit on his back porch until nearly 2 in the morning. Here is what I decided by the time the sun came up. Derek Voss was not going to get the chance to bury Riley Voss Engineering, and by extension my professional license, in a deal he had hidden from me. On Monday morning, I called our firm's attorney, a woman named Patricia Nunes who had drafted our original partnership agreement 11 years earlier, and I laid out everything. The missing signature, the unauthorized guarantee, the Aurora exposure. Patricia confirmed what I already knew, that Derek had breached the partnership agreement in a way that gave me legal grounds to force a full financial audit and, if the numbers were as bad as I suspected, to remove him from the firm entirely and retain the Riley Voss name and client base myself. It took 6 weeks. I will not pretend it was simple, because unwinding 11 years of shared business ownership never is, but the audit confirmed everything. Derek had personally guaranteed exposure the firm could not absorb without consent, in direct violation of our founding agreement, and he had done it to chase the kind of high-visibility commercial deals that fed his ego rather than the steady, unglamorous work that had actually kept our firm profitable and our reputation clean for a decade. By the terms of the partnership agreement, I was entitled to buy out his interest at a valuation set before his unauthorized deals had inflated the firm's apparent value, which meant Derek walked away from 11 years of work with significantly less than he expected. And I walked away with full ownership of the firm we had built together, minus a business partner who had called me small for finishing a doctorate while he quietly gambled with my license. I heard through a mutual contact, an inspector we had both worked with for years, that the Aurora development Derek had personally guaranteed collapsed entirely 3 months later when the permitting dispute went against the developer. Derek had walked away from our partnership with a payout, but he had also personally co-signed on that separate development in his own name, outside the firm, apparently confident enough in his own instincts to bet his personal finances on it too. I do not know the full details of what that cost him. I did not ask, and I did not celebrate when I heard. I simply noted it the way I note any structural failure that was not mine to prevent once the load-bearing element had already been removed from the beam. Priya Anand, I later heard from Rachel, ended the engagement for months after it began. I have no insight into why, and it is not my business, but I noticed that the man who could make a 200-person spectacle out of a proposal could not, apparently, make the quieter and harder commitment that comes after it. Rachel and I went to counseling, the real kind, unglamorous and slow, with a therapist named Dr. Naomi Kessler whose office sits above a bakery in Old Town Fort Collins. It took months for Rachel to be able to say out loud what the truth actually was, which was that somewhere in the last 2 years of my doctorate, she had stopped seeing my quiet, consistent effort as something worth showing up for, and had started mistaking Derek and Priya's louder, shinier life for something more exciting to be part of. She was not proud of that. Neither was I proud of how invisible I had let myself become in my own house while I chased a degree I genuinely believed would be for all of us. We are still doing that work. Some weeks are easier than others, but 4 months after that graduation, on a Saturday afternoon, my firm, now simply Riley Engineering, sponsored a structural safety seminar for local contractors, and I stood at the front of a full room and gave the keynote. And when I looked up during the closing remarks, I saw Rachel sitting in the second row with all 3 kids, Owen filming the entire thing on his phone, the same phone that had once sent me a video of everything I had missed. Grace asked me afterward if I was the smartest man in the room. I told her I did not know about that, but I did know how to tell when something was about to fall down before it actually did, and that mattering more than a proposal, more than a party, more than anyone's applause, is usually the difference between a life that holds and a life that collapses when you are not looking. My name is Marcus Riley. I am 41 years old. I am the sole owner of Riley Engineering in Fort Collins, Colorado, a doctor of philosophy in structural engineering, and a man who learned the hard way that the people who are supposed to show up for you will tell you exactly who they are the day it matters most, if you are paying enough attention to notice.